Hey guys, all right, so we're heading into what is the New Deal. The New Deal is typically considered the response to the Great Depression. It's famously done by FDR. It's a big topic. In a normal AP US history year, it'd be guaranteed to be on the exam, but this is not a normal year, so I guess we'll see. But anyway, it's fundamental in how it shaped the nature of our government and our economy today, so it's important regardless. Now, what you're going to be covering today, the things you'll need today are the New Deal 3 R's handout posted on Canvas. There's a set of readings on Canvas as well that you're going to need to access, and then a first and second New Deal chart. All right. Definitely the thing you need right in front of you right now is a New Deal 3 R's handout. All right. So let's first of all talk about the election of 1932. As you could imagine, Herbert Hoover was incredibly unpopular. As we talked about just earlier, he did too little too late. He didn't do much of anything. There was the famous Hoovervilles that emerged, and listen, these were shanty towns that popped up in parks around the country. He wasn't the one who was responsible for the Great Depression. He was in office for a relatively short amount of time when it started. It was the policies of the time, among other factors, that contributed. So, as we've talked about in the past, people get blamed for these economic downturns. Whoever's in office gets blamed. It's not usually their fault. But if we start looking at these numbers, a couple things I want to point out here is if we start looking at this map, you'll notice this map right here, the coloring is designed to show you where the voters, or where the most intense voting was for each party. So if you look at down here, the deep, 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 deep blue is unbelievably heavy Democratic voting for FDR. And if you look across, and it's not shocking especially when you look at the Electoral College map, that FDR won a gigantic, huge victory. Again, we were in the middle of the worst depression in U.S. history. Hoover did very little about it, and he kind of got swept out of office. His few areas of where he was popular were basically in the Northeast, but other than that, nowhere. All right, so a couple key terms we want to know from the New Deal in terms of his response. There's an expression called the first 100 days. This has become a term that is used for every president going forward. So uh, every president gets elected or even reelected, there will be on any news network or any news station will be this like countdown to the first 100 days. The reason it's so significant with FDR is that the minute he became president, and he was also helped here by sweeping changes in Congress. Republicans were voted out in mass numbers. Democrats controlled both houses very easily. So he didn't have to fight with anybody. So in the first 100 days, he's going to pass, as it says here, 15 major pieces of legislation designed to fight the Great Depression. That's an incredible number. I just want to mention this now, and I'll mention it again later. But this is the first 100-day period. He'll have another 100-day period when he wins re-election in 36. Well, technically, he'll that takes place in 37. But still, a 100-day period is we see that he's hitting the ground running. He's going to make lots of changes. Now, the other famous thing we want to know about FDR here is these things called fireside chats. Uh, FDR understood better than Hoover before him the importance of speaking directly to the American people. Radios had become more commonplace. People had them in their homes. That meant that he could then speak directly to the people instead of allowing newspapers or magazines to speak for him. And so he would make these almost weekly or bi-weekly addresses to the country that he would basically explain, all right, here's my legislation, here's what it's going to do for you, and why that's good for you. He basically was able to speak directly to the people, and he used the radio, this new mass media, to assist him in this. Now, the presidents in the 1920s had radio too. It was growing in popularity. People definitely had them. But FDR seemed to understand the importance of it more than they ever did and use it to his benefit. Now, as we move into the New Deal is basically going to be dropped into each thing done in the New Deal is dropped into one of three categories. It's designed to provide relief, reform, or help recover. So relief. These are programs that are going to immediately provide assistance to those who are struggling so they can stay alive and continue to live. Reform. There were many factors that led to the Great Depression. And FDR is going to basically pass legislation and reforms designed to prevent this from ever happening again. All right. And then lastly, recover. Now, relief gets people the things they need to live. But in the end, that's not sustainable. You need people to get back to work. You need the economy to recover. And so he also put into place some legislation that was designed to not just give that immediate need to survive stuff, but also push you further. Now, I don't know how much you're paying attention to the news right now, but right now we're seeing stuff like this in the news. Congress is passing a $2 trillion relief stimulus plan to try to help counteract the recent challenges created by coronavirus. So we're kind of living in this New Deal stuff right now. So it's kind of fascinating that we're talking about it. All right, so here's what I'm asking you to do. All right. On Canvas, you will find a reading that basically breaks four major areas or issues that need to be addressed by the New Deal. Issues for urban workers, farmers, the elderly or dependents, and then lastly, what's the last one? Last one is banking. Sorry. All these four things need to be addressed by the New Deal. So go through the readings, figure out what the problem was, so that you could discuss it later, and then it will give you specific actions taken by FDR to address those problems. And then at the bottom, there's some summary questions where you're basically going to say, all right, what things are being done there for relief, recovery, and reform, and how do they do those things, right? Because again, this is a big topic. I don't know what the AP exam is going to look like in May, but this could very well be one of the things they talk about because it's so big, they expect everyone to kind of know it. All right, so why don't you pause the video and start working your way through that stuff. All right, so real quick, hopefully you've done your readings, you've taken detailed notes. I'm just going to fly through stuff really quickly with you in terms of major things we should know. The WPA, the FERA, and the NRA. Um, Here's what we basically want to know. What they did for workers was put them to work, get them a job. What kind of job to do didn't matter. And literally, they joked that basically people were paid to, one person was paid to dig a ditch, the next person was paid to fill in the ditch with that dirt. It didn't matter. The whole goal was just to give these people jobs. Now, some of the things they did were incredibly valuable. For example, the WPA is probably the most famous one. The WPA is going to help build city parks, schools, pools, bridges, things in and around the communities that we live in today. Charlotte probably has a few projects. I know that for me growing up, the elementary school I went to was built by the WPA. So that's being done for workers in the cities, right? Then the other famous one is the CCC. This basically took people and put them out into more rural areas. Specifically, they really focused on national parks. These people would build trails, they would build visitor centers, they would basically do all these things. And what makes the CCC a little different than the WPA is these young men would also learn job skills and then would live there in a camp and get paid. And they got paid pretty well. And the whole point was that they would work and send money home. All right, that I'm stressing that. Hey, we're supposed to send money home. So think about what this means for the benefit of the country. You got these guys employed, they're making some money, they're learning a job skill, so that will help with recovery later. But also, they're putting money into their hands and then almost making them send it home to somebody who might need it. So these are all designed to kind of, get people back to work and be able to push for the economy. Here's the thing, you can't employ everybody. So the hope was employ some. Those people have a job, they're spending money, then that would lead to more demand. More demand means more production means more workers, and then suddenly your economy is climbing in the right direction. All right, next one, farmers. We definitely talked about this and how farmers were absolutely crushed by the 1920s, right? Food prices fell, overproduction destroyed them. The government did little, did absolutely did nothing to help them. So FDR is going to step in and try to provide some solutions. Now, these are two kind of controversial things because if we think about the AAA and the RA, essentially what they're doing is they're trying to reduce farm production. Now, stop, pause, think about what that means. In the middle of a depression where people are struggling to get food, you're essentially telling farmers to use less land or to be paid to make less food. That is a really hard sell to the American people. It's a really difficult thing to do. But that's what they did. And the hope was they could drive up prices enough. And that's a balancing act, right? Obviously, you want prices to go up to help the farmers, but you also don't want to go up too much and then crush the consumers who were desperate to be able to even just get food. Was it successful? Yeah, the RA certainly was not. Um, the reality is, farmers are difficult people to kind of change. Farmers are typically generational. You're telling them to give up their farms, and kind of move on. That's not something they're really interested in doing. Also, if you were a sharecropper or tenant farmer under the AAA, you didn't benefit. You didn't own the land, but your boss did. So the person who basically took every half the stuff you grew and charged you crazy rent and interest and all that stuff, well, he got you again because he could basically get paid money to grow less and then kick you off. So how effective was this? Debatable, but it was again, at least FDR, to his credit, is looking at the problems of the Great Depression and attempting to solve them. So in terms of what are, there's a little bit of reform, or it's a lot of reform and a little bit of relief. I don't know how much recovery is there though. All right, elderly. All right, so the elderly have a problem here. They're too old to work, and with sky high unemployment, 25% at its peak. It's going to be really hard for them to get a job considering there's so many young, able-bodied men who are looking for work. So no one's going to hire an older person. So they basically have no choice. And then between the bank runs and the stock market crash, whatever money they had is gone. So you need to find a reasonable solution for them. So the solution is obviously probably of all the things FDR did, this is has the longest lasting legacy because the Social Security Act and the Social Security system is still around and it is the largest government expense currently. Just so you understand how it works, basically, what you got to do is you work and you pay. If any of you have a job, you see this. They pull some money out of your check every check, and it goes to Social Security. Now, in theory, what happens is you get that money when you retire, but really what happens is this: you're paying for those who are retired now. And so when you get to the age of retirement, then that means that the people who are working will pay for your retirement. The problem is, and I know some of us are going to go, oh, boomers. Yeah, boomers. Yeah. They're a large percentage of the population. There aren't enough people who are working to support them. And so basically, Social Security is struggling to under that weight. Um, but again, this program was incredibly successful in the sense that it solved one of the largest problems of the Great Depression. Elderly people who were unable to work suddenly could have jobs. The other problem I want to stress to you here is this: it caused what we call the Roosevelt recession, and you'll see what that looks like a little bit later when we look at a different part of this unit. But here's the thing: you got to pay for it, which means you need a new tax. And so that new tax that was put on both the people and companies, well, the companies started hiring less. People got laid off, and so you will see a small spike in unemployment. So Social Security is probably again the most influential, most important thing he did, but it's also one of the more controversial things as well. All right, so we don't have much time left. So let's talk about banking. So if we remember, one of the big issues of the Great Depression was banks lent out all that money, right? And used it to buy stocks. And then when that market crashed, they had no money. So here's the thing they got to do, right? So they got to do a couple really quick things here. One, the Glass-Steagall Act, that's one of those big highlight ones you got to know, and the FDIC. So FDIC's very much still around today. Every bank you ever go to today in the United States, you'll see a little sticker, a little placard that says FDIC insured. Essentially, what that means is you put your money in the bank account, and no matter what happens to that bank, the government will back what's in there. Today, I think the number is up to $400,000. I think that's about the number. As you can see, it was up to about $5,000 at the time, which would have been pretty much every rich person. Now, also stressing this, that's per account. So if you had tons of money, you could spread it all over the place, your money's protected. The most important thing the Glass-Steagall Act did was it realized that investment banking and commercial banking, aka the banking that you and I do, got to be separate. So this never happens again. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that has become blurred one more time. And then lastly, in order to solve the issue with the bank runs, the Emergency Banking Act or bank holidays, it basically made banks close, figure their crap out before they could reopen. Now, here's the deal. The other thing that you should get out of the section is a New Deal chart. The New Deal is a gigantically important thing. There's tons of agencies or legislation or reforms you got to know. So between what I've just given you, your reading guide from the AMSCO book, you should fill out that chart because when I give you your unit test, I'm going to basically make you do a matching game so that you know what each one of these agencies did. All right, guys, see you in the next video.